Welcome to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Skye McDonald. Prepare to laugh, cry, and swoon. Skye McDonald authors contemporary romances to give you the tingles and tug on your heart. From the 1980s to the hockey rink, Skye's characters must fall in love with themselves before embracing their happily ever after relationships. Spoiler, they always do. Her award-winning, best-selling novels pull readers deep into a world of witty dialogue and sizzling connections. Skye is known for her Anti-Belle series standalone books set in her hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. She is currently developing a hockey romance series which began with Scoreless, a goalie love story. She co-authors the Unlikely Pairing series. Skye is also a coach, podcaster, and speaker. She co-hosts the Quick and Dirty Romance podcast and has been featured in podcasts and anthologies. Skye lives in Montclair, New Jersey. When she's not writing, she facilitates a women's entrepreneurial group, hikes with her dogs, travels, and scuba dives. Someday she'll take a break and chill out, preferably on a beach, but not yet. There's so much life to live first. Welcome, Skye. Please tell us a little more about yourself and your novel, Scoreless.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Really, really excited to talk to you today. So yeah, I write books that are steamy, fun romances, but the real point is to give you a story. And the story that I'm going to give you is about a person learning to fall in love with themselves and accept who they are before they step up and claim a relationship, or as we would say in the romance world, the happily ever after. Because every romance has to have a happily ever after. But happily ever after in real life is about loving yourself. So all of my books are about strong women who are learning to embrace exactly who they are. And then you get all the swoons as well. So it's fun. All my books are standalones because I really want people to dive in where it feels comfortable and most compelling to them. But honestly, the more of me that you read, the more of the world that you will get, because I really like to put that thread through there. But honestly, you can start anywhere. My Anti-Belle series, as you said, is all set in my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. But there is a bridge between that and the Connecticut Commodores hockey series. 2 of 3 hockey books are out already, Scoreless and Scored On. In the Crease is the 3rd book, which I am currently working on right now, and it will come out in late October. Yeah, so all of my books, you can jump in anywhere. They're going to give you a great story, but the more of me you read, you get a world that I think you're just going to have a lot of fun with.
Okay. So you mentioned the hockey series, the Connecticut Commodores series, actually, and is about hockey players. Why did you choose to set the series in the world of hockey?
Okay, because I'm going to be honest, hockey is having a huge moment in romance right now. It's extremely popular and many, many titles have come out. But that's not why I wrote it. I'm a big hockey fan, and I've been a hockey fan for 20 plus years. So I actually penned Scoreless, or drafted, I should say, Scoreless back in about 2016, 2017. But I didn't do anything with it because, well, that's a long story of my publishing journey. But basically to say, now was the time in the series and the way I was writing to bring it out. But luckily, it was right on time because, again, hockey is really hot. But I decided to write it, honestly, because of my deep love of hockey. And if you check out Scoreless, then you will see that the opening dedication is part of the dedication is to Patrick Waugh, who was one of the greatest goalies of all time, because I have a real thing for goalies. So I was very excited to write that story.
Okay. So I guess I should ask, my next question is about, do you draw inspiration from real people or events when creating characters?
Okay, great question. The answer is partially yes and also not at all. So the main character in Scoreless, the male main character is Quentin Paris. Okay, Quinn Paris is a French-Canadian goalie, and I happen to have a particular fondness for French-Canadian goalies, Patrick Waugh being one of them. He's long retired. He actually coaches the New York Islanders right now, but nevertheless, he was my first goalie. I also enjoy Marc-Andre Fleury, who is active, although he is retiring this year. But I didn't try to write either of those men as the male main character. It's not a thinly veiled fan fiction. Quinn is very much his own person, and indeed, going back to my Anti-Belle series, book 4 in the Anti-Bell series is actually his brother is the male main character. So there's the bridge there between these two worlds. Um, so no, for the most part, all of my characters are very much from my head. I think that the most notable exceptions to that actually came in the Friends to Lovers romance I wrote that is set in 1986, because there's a record store owner in that story. He is not one of the love interests. He is more like the wise mentor kind of character, but a little bit of like the dude from The Big Lebowski. And I drew total inspiration from my father for that character. My dad ran record stores in Nashville in the 80s. So I kind of put dad into the book and had so much fun doing so. I really want him to come to like a book conference with me as like the man himself. But yeah, that would be about the only time I've ever been like, I want to put somebody I know in a book, and that was it.
Okay, that's such a cool story, actually. I hope he does go with you one day. Um, how do you incorporate current social issues or trends into your romance novels without overshadowing the romance itself?
Well, that's a great question. I try to take a very light hand on that. Okay. First of all, one thing about my platform is that I really want everyone to feel welcome in my world that I've created, in the women's group that I run here in Montclair. Anywhere, if you're with me, I want you to feel like we can be friends, because that's the energy that I'm going to come with. So I really do work to fairly keep it politically neutral, but at the same time, definitely promoting the idea that like love wins. I will say, do again back to the '80s book. I did put a fairly hot button topic in there, it's touching upon abortion, actually, but it wasn't a political treatise disguised as a romance novel. It simply was what that character had gone through in the past. So I didn't write it with the idea of like I have something I must say. Like I'm not shy about saying what I need to say, but it was more about like this is a woman who's had to make hard choices. So I try not to put too much politics other than the idea of accepting people and loving both others and yourself for who you are. Um, at the same time, things like social trends, those are tricky because you want to make sure your book is fairly timeless. So to that end, for example, the book I'm working on right now in the Crease, book 3 in the hockey series, the woman the female main character is a social media influencer, but I'm not listing what platform she's on. She's just taking to social media because I don't want 15 years from now for it to feel like, oh gosh, that relic, you know? I think that most of the platforms are going to have a bit of longevity. Certainly, we know Facebook has, but I just kind of wanted to keep it more in the moment. And other than that, I really try not to make anything that's too niche, but I do definitely like to work music and musical references into my books or musical titles. And some of those are very contemporary and some of them are very classic. So yeah, I want to make it feel like now, except for the 80s book. That's not supposed to feel now. But I want it to feel now without it feeling like stuck in time.
Okay. Okay. And what do you find most rewarding about writing romance novels?
I love people falling in love. It's it's some people don't choose that path in life. Some people don't, and that's fine. But I think most humans understand, even if you don't partner, even if you partner many times, even if you aren't particularly sexual, which is fine. I think most of us understand the human condition of wanting someone to look at you and say, yeah, you, you. And I love creating those stories. I love the moment where it clicks or it works and it's just like, yes, you. And also, yes, me. I'm going to go for this. So I love creating stories around that because it's such a bedrock of, like I said, the human experience that you can build almost anything else on top of it and still have a lot of fun. So that's why I like romance.
Okay. Now, what do you hope your readers feel or experience when they read your novels?
Well, I have a very serious agenda on that one, actually. I hope my readers, well, honestly, I hope they laugh, cry, and swoon. That is my trademark phrase, and I am here for it. But I really hope my readers feel inspired to be kinder to themselves. I think one of the most difficult things that we face right now as a culture is the amount of fear and anger that we work with. And I think that that could be changed if we loved ourselves a little bit more and if we looked within a little bit more. And I think that it is easy to reject others and reject yourself when you can't and you aren't prepared to do the deep work of truly getting down to what you want and need and going for it. So I really hope that any book that a reader picks up that's a Skye McDonald book makes them laugh, but makes them also say, yeah, I'm worth something. I'm worth it.
Okay, it's a great message. That's a great
Thank you.
message. Um, can you share any personal experiences or anecdotes that influenced your writing?
Okay, so by that, do you mean like particular scenes in a book, or do you mean like my writing life or my real life influencing like being a writer?
I would say like something that happened to you that you incorporated into one of your stories.
Okay. All right. So I have some funny ones. Most of them, most of the ones I share have to do with like really weird situations with honestly with men. So I'm gonna start there. In book one of my anti-Bell series, Not Suitable for Work, um, Celeste, the main character, is drinking a whiskey at dinner or at out to drinks with colleagues, and one of her colleagues goes, "Oh, watch out for girls who drink whiskey. You know what that's about." And she was like, "No," and he's like, "It's okay." That happened to me. I was like, "I don't understand what you're saying right now, but I'm going to move on." Um, in book four, Just Your Type, Megan goes on a very disastrous first date and like an app date where the guy starts talking about how he's into sexual massage and he would like her to come home because his mom's not home yet or right now and he's living with his mom. And that happened to me on a Tinder date. You can't make that up.
Wow.
So those are things that I was like, well, that's going into a book. But in Scoreless, no, I definitely took inspiration from a famous Patrick Waugh goalie fight, which I was not around to see. I didn't see that, but I definitely took some info from there. Scoreless mostly is just entirely fiction. I can't think of a scene that's particularly like, oh yeah, that happened. But definitely there are moments and there are phrases that people use that I'll record or I'll write down and I'll be like, well, that's going into a book somewhere. So I definitely have those.
Okay. Can you describe your writing process from the idea to the finished manuscript?
Okay. So I'm going to use a political phrase that came out just the other night. I have a concept of a plan around a book, and then and then I have no commentary about that phrase other than it's brilliant. It absolutely describes the way I start a book. I'm like, okay, so I think it's going to be like that, and I think it's going to be like that, and now we go. I am very much what they call a pantser. Okay, just I kind of just jump in. Sometimes this is very frustrating because, for example, In the Crease has been restarted about 4 times. This is my latest book that I'm working on. It's not out yet. But I'm finally on the right track. I got my groove and I'm all good. My writing process is really to think about the book quite a lot. And I'll do that when I'm off, most often when I'm active. So hiking with my dogs or, recently I was at a lake, so we were stand-up paddleboarding around. I had 2 dogs on the board and I'm like, what would Ryan do? So, but it's a really good way, movement for me is a really good way to allow story to feed my mind, I guess you would say. And then I often will look up names. Like I'll often need to look up a name. because I'll need some ideas for what the names will be. Quentin and Audrey in Scoreless, I had those names right away. Those were not difficult names for me to come up with. Some characters have actually had names like abruptly changed very early on and things like that, but Quinn and Audrey were always Quinn and Audrey.
Okay. Are there any craft elements that you feel are your strong suit, while others you would like to be better at?
I'm really good at dialogue. A lot of people say they feel like they know the characters and they're hanging out with them as they're reading them. Um, I like that. I'm proud of how I write from the male point of view. All of my books are dual POV, male and female, and all of my books are male-female romances. That's just how I write. You know, I have no problem with any other iteration, but those are my books. But I always write from the male POV, and I'm fairly proud of the fact that I feel like I have a good handle on a guy's voice, a general guy's voice, and I've had male beta readers help me with that. And that's definitely something I work on the craft of, is making sure that the character sounds authentic to the character. So that's important. Things that I wish I was better at, transitions and writing shorter sentences. Like, I very much like, as a former English teacher, I'm very aware of how many compound, complex, and simple sentences are going, and how many times like I'll start to use, like, this is very grammar nerd, but like a gerund phrase, like blah blah blah. I said, drinking from my glass. Like, sometimes I overuse stuff like that, and then I go back. I'm like, what were you doing? So I kind of wish I had a grammar, or like an editor fairy to just make it flow perfectly the first time. Editing is definitely the trenches of writing.
Okay. And how do you approach character development? Do your characters ever surprise you as you're writing?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, sometimes when authors talk about this, they sound a little bit nutty. But because I am a pantser, because I do allow the characters to come to me, there have been times, especially early in my writing career, when I was working, like, for example, again, I'm going to point to The Not So Nice Girl. That was a very interesting journey of a book for me. That's the 80s book. The female main character, who already mentioned the political thing about the abortion. I kept wondering why she was acting like she was. And I didn't know that she had had this whole backstory. I was like, why is she afraid to settle down? Why is she afraid to commit to this? And it was like one day, it was like, she just was like, this is what happened to me. And I was like, oh, okay. So that was a real interesting moment of like almost like having a character whisper at me. In terms of the development for women, though, what I really want, especially now, late, like as I've been writing for many years now, and because I do have the agenda that we talked about just a few minutes ago, my goal is to know the woman's weak spot. Like, I want to know what her self hangups are. Not to say that I'm portraying like a basket case, but rather a mosaic of a person. She has a lot of strengths, but there's something about what she's going through that makes her fearful of just like saying, yeah, I'm in a relationship now, right? Or else we don't have a story. So I'm always looking at what motivates her, what holds her back, right? And that is a really important, I think, piece of the character development, is getting on point. So for example, in Scored On, which is the second book in our Connecticut Commodore series, Stella, in book one, Stella is Audrey's bestie. She seems to be very glamorous, and she seems to have men whenever she wants. In book two, you realize that that's Audrey's perception of Stella, and that is not the way that things are. Okay, so Stella is actually stuck between her secret clandestine job and trying to say yes to her parents' every whim, because her parents are very wealthy and very influential, and she is just trying to make her own way. And so she is not as together as Audrey perceived her to be, because Audrey like looked up to her in a lot of ways. So really working through that character development of like, what is this person really going through? Yeah.
Okay. So you've been writing for many years now. What would you say, how have you developed as a writer over those years?
Well, I started writing because I had the idea of a story. I did not start like, okay, gonna be an author now. Like, that was not that was not where I was going with this. I just had the thought of a story and I was like, this would be fun. So I started, and then that turned into this whole, I actually I wrote an essay called Writer's Life Ruined My Life. I have a long story about how that happened, but not in a bad way, just in a way. But definitely I started off just kind of putting pen to paper and writing fun, sexy stories that I thought seemed cool. At this point, especially, so what I actually did was that I drafted pretty much all of the books I've ever written well before I published anything. So I had drafts of all of the Anti-Bell series, and even scoreless, not scored on, but even scoreless. Okay. So, but when I was writing them, I was just kind of writing fun, sexy stories. When I went back and brought them into the world, I revised some of them, I pretty much entirely rewrote, but I was definitely doing it with the purpose, like I said, to inspire people and make them think and make them love. And I guess content wise, I wrote a lot of steamy scenes. Like early iterations of some of my books, it's like, oh, again, they're going to go again. So I was like, not to say that you won't have my books are open door romances, but I definitely brought the focus onto the characters, and I cleaned up a lot of scenes that it was like, yeah, I don't really think we need this. And definitely also the way they spoke. So there are certain phrases or certain things that I wasn't really thinking about when I started writing. I just kind of threw it in. That I was like, oh no, we're not going to talk like that. We're not going to do that. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, what was your publishing journey? You've kind of said a little.
Oh, uh-huh. My publishing journey. So Not Suitable for Work is the first book that I ever released, and it is the first book in the Anti-Bell series. The 1980s book is actually a prequel, but never mind that. The first book I wrote, the first book I released is An Office Rivals to Lovers. Celeste has come home from New York brokenhearted after being like completely gaslit by her cheating boyfriend. And she's broke and she's trying to get a job, and she ends up falling in love with the guy she's competing with for the job. So lots of complicated. Anyway, I obtained an agent in early 2018. And I did that in a very sort of unusual way of getting an agent, because I actually pitched my whole series as opposed to the one book. And I got an agent, and the agent helped me revise the book. I actually ended up making it dual POV because originally it wasn't, but I needed continuity within the series. And we went out on submission that year. And in that time, my personal life fell apart, and my marriage ended. My marriage at the time ended. But as I was going through all of that, we got back decline after decline. And the most feedback that I got was, it's a really good book, but we don't want it at this time. It was not like, oh, if you change this, or, oh, this isn't right. It's like, it's good, but we just don't want it. So a year later, on another chapter of my personal life, I parted ways with the agent, and I was like really unsure what to do. I was obviously very discouraged. It was a bummer. But the person I was seeing at the time said something that, while our relationship did not continue, his words stay with me, which was, in 10 years, are you going to regret if you don't give it one more shot? And I was like, well. So I looked into what it was like to be a publisher and how to open a sole prop, which then became an LLC. I got ISBNs. I did the whole thing. I got an amazing cover designer who has designed all of my covers. And I published Not Suitable for Work myself under Anti-Bell Books brand in September of 2019. So yeah, she's just about 5 years old now. So I did all of that. And from there, I just kept publishing. And I did end up working with a publisher for the release of the 80s book, actually. So I'm a hybrid author now, but I am my own press, and I have published my books, the Unlikely Pairing series, which I co-author, and I'm working on some anthologies for 2025. So really happy with how my publishing label is going, but that is my publishing journey.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. What role do beta readers or editors play in your writing process?
All my love to my critique partners and beta readers. They make a huge difference. Book 2, off the record, I had the male main character doing some shenanigans in a bathroom during their breakup their breakup period, and my beta reader's like, no, 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 we can't do that. So I changed that fundamentally. In Scoreless, I had amazing feedback about, right, let's go to Scoreless. One of the best beta readers I've ever had is my hockey goalie, Jared, who read the whole book, even though I really only asked him to, pleaded with him to read the on ice scenes, because one of the things about Scoreless is it's got a lot of hockey in it. But Jared is a goalie, not an NHLer, but that's fine. He's a goalie, and he's been a goalie a long time, and he voluntarily read my whole book and gave me feedback on the way Quinn talked about certain things, certain logistical things. He's also been a great consult, because In the Crease, the one I'm writing now, is also about a goalie. He's actually the backup goalie on the team, but he's been really valuable in helping me make sure that I get the hockey right, because I know hockey. I'm a hockey fan, but he plays hockey. So that's been super valuable. And otherwise, like I said, as a pantser, sometimes I'm like, look, I don't know where this is going. And my beta readers will jump in to read the first 20 pages and give me super valuable feedback that allows me to take it where I want it to go. So very, very, very appreciative.
Okay. How do you stay motivated and committed to the project, especially during the revision and editing stages?
I struggle with motivation. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. That's a really interesting question, because it doesn't occur to me to be like, no, I'm not going to do it. The biggest moment, as I said, where I was like, I may just quit this, was when I wasn't sure if I was going to actually go with being a publisher. And that was really a moment where I was extremely discouraged. And I was like, maybe I just don't do this anymore. But other than that, like, when I'm going to release a book, it's like, well, this is going to happen. So I just kind of do it. But I definitely organize my day so that I think one of the biggest moments of burnout is if I realize I've been working too long and I need to take a break, because I can definitely go into a tunnel. And I think that the most important part is giving yourself like a pace, and also setting calendar deadlines. So it's like, okay, this needs to be drafted by now, so it can be revised by now.
Okay. How important is or was joining a writer's group or having critique partners?
So personally and professionally, extremely important. My original group of critique partners and writer group, like almost unofficially, was actually on Twitter, in the writerverse of Twitter, around about 2017, 2018. And some of my best friends I met there. Like, people like, okay, so my writing part, my Unlikely Pairing series is co-authored between myself and Sarah Smith, who is another romance novelist. And Sarah and I live on opposite coasts. Sarah's in Oregon, but she is one of my best friends, and she is the one that I have written 3 books with that have hit Amazon bestseller, and she's my co-host on the Quick and Dirty Romance podcast. So I wouldn't have known her if it weren't for the writerverse of Twitter and us beta reading each other's first books. So not only is it useful in crafting of the story and making the story the best it could be, it's also given me friends, people I love, and that I know I can count on to not just say, oh, it's great. Like, they're not going to say that. They're going to tell me what I need to hear. And that's tremendous. It's absolutely tremendous.
What advice would you give a new writer that's just starting out?
I bet you hear this a lot. Write. Just write. Don't worry about your end goal. Don't worry about it. Also, probably don't go into it thinking you're going to make $1 million or you're going to be the next so and so. If that happens for you, awesome. But if you don't write because you love to write, there are a million other jobs to do, right? Like writing fiction is such a saturated industry. Writing fiction is such a overwhelmingly like demanding thing, whether you're an indie or a trad published author, you know, making deadlines, making sure that your craft is good, all of those things. If you love it, do it. And then figure out what you're going to do with it, which may be nothing, right? It may be just for you. And if it is, you're still an author. I've heard so many people like, oh, well, no, I'm not a writer. You know, I've got a book that I've been working on for a while, but I'm not. And it's like, no, yes, you are. So write because you love to write. And then if you decide to make it a business, just know it's also a business, right? But those two things don't have to be all at once.
Okay, that's a great one. I have to be that it's a business, because I mean, I think that, you know, writing is such a solitary thing where you're just like pouring yourself onto the page, and then you kind of have to stop that to turn your attention to the actual selling. So yes, some people just want that writing experience and it's cathartic and they want to put the information, you know, their thoughts on the page, but they don't necessarily know how hard the other part is.
Exactly. It's hard, it's grueling. If you try to go trad, it's hard, it's grueling. It can be wildly successful, it can be moderately successful, indie can be wildly successful, moderately successful, whatever it is. Just know that like when you're writing, but if you're going to become an author, like a published author, whatever path you take, do approach it like a business. Yeah, marketing, branding, you know, SEO, website, like all of it comes in, and also making sure that you own your property, right? Also making sure that like your property is protected, all of those things. But if you just have a story you want to write, just write the story. Don't worry about that right now. Don't worry about that right now.
So this is my final question. What can you tell us about the Quick and Dirty Romance podcast?
The Quick and Dirty Romance podcast is where we tell you all the juicy details of being a romance author, and then we pull out and wrap it up in 30 minutes or less, but we promise to leave you satisfied. Sarah Smith and I, like I said, we became friends and beta readers way back. And at some point in 2019, she and I both had our first books released around September of 2019. We decided that we should also podcast. So we talk about author life. We talk about topics of the industry. We talk about writing those steamy sex scenes and more. That's one of our opening bits we have every time we do our opening monologue. We have chatted with fellow authors, local authors in New Jersey, which has been really awesome because I love my local New Jersey Romance Writers Association. I love the group. We've chatted with authors coast to coast, but we talk about either writer's life, topics of how we do something, or trends that we're seeing, probably on social media or discussion. So for example, recently she's writing hockey, so we've talked about hockey, but we've also been talking about ARC readers. So that's a little different than the beta reader, for anybody who's listening, because ARC readers are advanced readers. So the book is done, you're not looking for feedback, you need reviews. And like we were just talking about the business of publishing, it's a business, and it's a business partnership that you're engaged in. So there's been a lot of discourse on social media around what authors ask for and what ARC readers are giving, and how to make sure that it's compatible. So we've done a couple of episodes on that. We've talked about, gosh, just about everything. But we're always looking for new ideas. So if anybody has one they want to hear, they should listen to the episode and DM us.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Skye, for being here today, and good luck on your Connecticut Carver series and finishing up in the crease.
Thank you.
And much success. We wish you much success.
Thank you so much. I hope that In the Crease makes its way into Wayne Public Library to join my first two in the series. And I'm in Wayne very regularly, but I hope that anybody who's listening to this, they can feel free to reach out to me. I'm very available on social media. I'm available via my website if they have any questions or comments. And then, there are a ton of book events happening in 2025 in the area and not too far from here. And I'll be in Massachusetts this fall as well. So I hope to meet some of the Wayne Public Library attendees very soon.